generation.
Dates in the Bible don't quite match the marriage certificate. Uh-oh.
And welcome to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. And I cannot believe it. And I want to thank you all so much for making this our 300th episode. That is a lot of recording, a lot of interviews, but more importantly, an awful lot of people listening to the show. So we appreciate each and every one of you who has been a part of this, especially those who've been here since the beginning, and to all the radio stations who carry the show and those who listen online. It is just an amazing thing. We started in, July of 2013. We went national in 2014. And here we are, 300th episode. Very excited about that today. Boy, do we have some great guests today. First of all, we're going to talk to Chris Child from NEHGS. He's going to talk about DNA and some recent discoveries concerning Mayflower descendants. Yeah, new Mayflower descendant lines as a result of DNA. And it's fascinating stuff, and you're going to want to hear which lines may have been affected by that, maybe one of yours. Plus, Heather Ruth Pack. She is a listener from Utah, and she had a near-death confession of her first great-grandfather passed on to her by her grandmother. And that information actually led to her discovering his real parents and his real ethnicity. It's fascinating stuff coming on a little bit later in the show. And, of course, at the back end, it's Ask Us Anything. We're going to answer a couple of your questions, so get ready for that. But right now, it's David Allen Lambert, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Hello, David.
Hey, how's things with you out in your part of the globe?
You know, it's wonderful, always finding new stuff and hearing new stories, and I just love what people are developing.
Well, we lost Richard Overton earlier this year, but we have now the oldest American veteran, a Louisiana native, who's 110.
Yeah, 110 years old, and he's being celebrated at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. Born September 12th, 1909. Unbelievable. Yeah, Laurence Brooks, and he just loves it because each of the last 5 years, they've given him a lot of attention there at the museum, and he especially loves the Victory Bells vocal trio. They serenade him, and they give him kisses, and he said, you know, I've only recently started to think about not having many birthdays left. And he said, I think the reason I've lived so long is because I've always liked people so much. Oh, yes, I do. So that's a great story. Congratulations to Lawrence, 110 years young and still celebrating.
That's amazing. Well, another World War II story has really kind of warmed my heart reading it. You know, there's so much stuff on eBay and out in flea markets, but a gentleman had recently gone to a flea market in Florida and tracked down a named Purple Heart. He returned it to the family, and the person that he delivered it to is actually the niece of the veteran. And this long-lost medal somehow turned up in Florida at a yard sale.
Yeah, and the person it's celebrating and honoring is a guy who was only 22 years old and was killed in the Battle of the Bulge.
It's probably a Purple Heart that was presented to the family posthumously and just ended up getting lost.
Unbelievable.
Well, I cherish the one that I have for Douglas A. Lambert that was given to me by my distant cousins. He was killed in World War II as well and received this when he was actually alive, and then he sent it home to his mom. Well, I'll tell you, I always love stories about being reunited, but occasionally you get those emails. You know the ones I'm talking about from Nigerian princes that are going to give you billions of dollars if you only send them 1,000?
Right.
Well, that's what our next person who's in New Zealand thought when an Australian gene detective reached out. But sure enough, it was true, and she is now going to inherit something over $300,000.
Oh, wow.
Through a child her mother had that she didn't even know about.
Isn't that incredible? Who knew? Yeah, this gene detective over there, he looks and finds these fortunes for people, and I would assume he takes a cut, which is only fair, but an amazing find, $300,000-some-odd. So congratulations to all of them. What a great thing.
It really is. Dear Abby has been on the American mind for decades now, and of course the next generation of Dear Abby continues, and one of the things I love is the genealogy stories, and there's one that you can find on extremegenes.com. The daughter who doesn't share her mom's obsession with family history. And she says her mom has collected too many things. She wants it all left exactly like it. Well, her mom is in something I hashtag and call the FHH Club. That's Family History Hoarders.
Right. Yeah, this is the thing that the mom is saying to the daughter, look, when I'm gone, I want the house to remain exactly as it is, and you must take care of all these things that I've found. And it's like, wait a minute. It doesn't work like that. You don't want to burden your descendants with this stuff. You want to enhance their lives. If they're interested in it, if they're not interested in it, find someone else who is. Don't force it on people.
Exactly. The next story has to deal with John Dillinger. We've talked earlier about them going to exhume his body. Yeah, well, that date's come and gone, and it still hasn't happened yet. In fact, the History Channel dropped out of the planned documentary. So we're staying tuned to see if somebody can dig up all the concrete and scrap iron that was dumped on top of his grave. And I personally say there's going to be a pretty flat John Dillinger to discover when they get done with it.
Could be.
My blogger spotlight this week shines on RootsTech. I'm delighted to be the ambassador for both London and just recently found out for Salt Lake City. So I'll see you there at RootsTech London or Salt Lake. But rootstech.org/blog, and you can read Elizabeth Miller's blog, The 10 Reasons to Attend RootsTech 2020. I can tell you I could probably think of a dozen or more as well, and many people do it for other reasons. To me, it's going out to see my RootsTech family out in Salt Lake and now in London.
Isn't that something? Isn't that going to be a great deal of fun? So thank you so much, David, and we will talk to you again at the back end of the show as we do another segment of Ask Us Anything.
All right, catch you around.
All right, and coming up next, I'm going to talk to Chris Child. He has done some work with Mayflower descendancy lines using DNA and made some remarkable new discoveries. You're going to want to hear what he's found and how he's done it. On the way next on Extreme Genes in 3 minutes. Hey, Genies, it is Fisher, and everyone loves stories. From tales of daring do's to family legends about great Auntie Gemma's secret recipe for scones, stories connect us to our past, make sense of the present, and create the future. This year, RootsTech, the world's largest genealogy conference, celebrated The Story of You. The event kicked off by celebrating 10 years of RootsTech with a look back at the stories the genealogy community has created together over the years. Attendees enriched their stories with classes about DNA and records and new technology. Keynotes this year included the inspiration behind the film The Blind Side, Leanne Toohey, Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer David Kennerly, and the NFL's all-time leading rusher Emmitt Smith. If you missed any part of these stories, you can purchase a virtual pass to gain access to 29 additional classes. The full virtual pass is available for only $129. You can watch the free session and purchase a virtual pass right now at rootstech.org.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Well, Genies, what a time we're all going through right now. And with all this time on our hands, you probably agree the best lemonade we can make out of this is to sharpen our genie axes and learn how to extend our family trees, gather more photos and documents, and discover those remarkable family stories our descendants can benefit from for generations. Well, I have more time now, too. and I want to help you learn what you need to know. That's why I've created a new Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. I'm so pleased that so many of you have already signed up and are helping us to create a supportive community of family history researchers. On this page, we can brainstorm and share ideas on how to tear down those brick walls that we all have. So feel free to join us. The Facebook page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Feel at home with others who live in our genie world and want to make the most of this unique time. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Join us. And welcome back to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. Very pleased to have my good friend Chris Child on the line. He is the senior genealogist of the Newbury Street Press and editor of the Mayflower Descendant, all associated with the New England Historic Genealogical Society. And Chris recently gave a talk about new DNA discoveries involving Mayflower descendants. And Chris, this is amazing, some of the things being discovered on the 400th anniversary, with it looming just ahead next year.
Yes, thank you. It's very interesting. Lots and lots of people who can trace their ancestry. Some estimates are around 30 million back to the Mayflower. And as a result of all these descendants, there's specific parts of our DNA that can be utilized for some really fascinating discoveries.
And I would imagine, too, as you say that, I'm thinking about it, DNA can probably disprove some lines as well, right?
Indeed, that's the case with Bill Griffith's Stranger in My Genes, where he takes a DNA test and learns immediately that his father was not his father. But we learned that also way back into the colonial period, where folks take a DNA test and they learn the line that they had thought was correct. And it might actually be correct on paper, but it's not correct genetically.
Yes. Hopefully we're adding more descendants than we're losing as a result of the test. Now, I'm thinking, just because we're going back 400 years, that autosomal really doesn't come into play with this, right?
No, and especially for the Mayflower, since the Mayflower group, once they get to the United States, they're a homogenous group. They intermarry with one another.
Sure.
There's a very limited amount of factors where you could utilize autosomal DNA that far back, and it doesn't relay into what we know about the Mayflower and how the families intermarried with one another. So we're not able to use autosomal DNA on any substantial basis in this regard.
Sure. Now, for those who are listening and aren't familiar, autosomal DNA is the DNA test normally done by Ancestry.com and 23andMe and all the other companies. But the ones that are a little more expensive and a little more specific are the ones that can really help you break through some of these lines. So we're talking about Y-DNA and mitochondrial, right, Chris?
Yes, and really the company that does this on the largest scale right now is FamilyTreeDNA.com. So
Yep.
The Y-DNA is a test that only men can take. So if you're a female, you'd have to get your brother or your dad to take the test. And this tests our father's line very far back. And based on mathematical probabilities and mutation rates, you can essentially determine the likelihood that two men would share a common ancestor through men only back in a certain way. And mitochondrial DNA works somewhat in the same way. It's a part of our DNA that both men and women have, but we only get it from our mother, who got it from her mother, and so on and so forth. So it's very much like the same, where you can take this test and see who you match to or who you don't match to.
All right, so let's talk about some of the new discoveries about the Mayflower. The 400th anniversary is next year. Everything's building up to that. And now there are still new finds about these families and descendant lines that are being made. What's the latest one, and what excites you about this?
Sure. So through essentially what I call patrilineal descendants of male Mayflower passengers, or matrilineal descendants of female Mayflower passengers or their spouses, we're able to get the Y-DNA or mtDNA sequences of all these different passengers. And you can make some discoveries either in the colonial period or in the turn of the Revolutionary War period. So one of the interesting things that I talked about recently, and I wrote an article in the journal that I had at the Mayflower Descendant in regards to Lieutenant John Sprague of Duxbury, Massachusetts, and Lebanon, Connecticut. Everything on paper would show that he's the child of John Sprague and his wife Ruth Bassett. but the DNA of all of his descendants is different than the Y DNA of his younger two brothers, and the Y DNA of his younger two brothers does show that they're the sons of their father, but the Y DNA for John Sprague is pointing that his father was a Fuller, and the Fuller family is a family that came over on the Mayflower. So this article that I wrote explores all of that and looks at the possible men who could be the father in 1655 of this boy, and makes several very interesting conclusions.
Wow. So were you able to narrow it down as to which one specifically was the dad?
So there were 6 Fuller men alive in 1655 who could father a child, and 5 of them were living elsewhere. They had moved out of Plymouth and were living in Barnstable. So that reasonably leaves Samuel Fuller, Jr., the son of one of the 2 Fuller brothers that came on the Mayflower, his father being also named Samuel Fuller. And
so among the descendants, anybody of note?
Sure. So Lieutenant John Sprague moved to Lebanon, Connecticut, and he is an ancestor of the Prime Minister Winston Churchill and the actor John Wayne. And both of those guys, prior to this, did not have any Mayflower ancestry.
And it's too bad they're not around to know this, right? I think they'd probably find it pretty fascinating. So you have added to the Duke and to the Prime Minister.
Yes, and on the same token, that it's possible that you could do research that might take away Mayflower ancestry. In this case, it's nice that we were able to sort of add some additional descendants. But
sure.
Often in some of these theories, we are testing them out. They're not ironclad theories, and we're trying to get either matrilineal or patrilineal descendants to see if any of these theories hold water or if they don't.
If they can be shot down. Well, that's, I think, what we do with everything in genealogy, right? You try to come up with your theory, you prove it, and then you try to disprove it some other way.
Yes, and also with DNA, I mean, I try to go as far back as I possibly can in terms of really knowing, making sure that I know the sequence of the people I'm talking about. So with the Sprague example, I got descendants of the 2 younger brothers down to the present day, and so they separated at 2 siblings born in the 1660s, and the fact that they matched each other makes it very clear that we knew the sequence of the father. So also when I'm doing matrilineal descendants, I try to get lines from 2 different sisters, so we're as far back as possible.
And so if there's only sons in a certain family, you're basically out of luck.
Yes, we often hear of the case of daughtering out in regards to surnames, but on mtDNA, you have the other side of that coin. You have families that son out.
Yeah. So what other Mayflower families have you made discoveries on?
So I've identified haplogroups of a good number of the Mayflower passengers. Another interesting one that I worked on was on some matrilineal descendants of Priscilla Mullins and John Alden. And they have 4 daughters that leave matrilineal descendants. And at the time I began this research, 3 of their daughters had matrilineal descendants down to the present day that had taken tests. The research I was doing regarded this woman, Esther Dyer, who was born in Braintree, Vermont in the 1790s. And essentially we had 2 competing theories on who her parents could be. Her parents could either be Ichabod Dyer Sr. and his wife Molly Jones, or their oldest son, Ichabod Dyer Jr., and his wife Phoebe Nichols. And because the 2 women, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, had different mtDNA sequences, whoever Esther's matrilineal descendant matched to would give us the likelihood of who her mother would be. And when we got the descendant, she matched to all the descendants of Priscilla Mullins, which meant that she belonged to Ichabod Sr. and his wife, and didn't match the descendants of Ichabod Jr. and his wife.
That is so cool. You must love getting up every day trying to figure this stuff. Although your eyes must be kind of blurry. What kind of eyeglass prescription do you have, Chris?
I do wear glasses, but it also takes a lot of patience because you have to contact a lot of living people, and they're not necessarily genealogists, and you have to explain to them what you're trying to do and your goals, and you often have to have plans B and C and D, and then you have to have patience and waiting for the tests and for the labs to get back.
It takes a long time. I've never dealt with a mitochondrial test. How long does that take to get back compared to, say, a Y or autosomal?
Sure. Their average time is 2 to 3 months, and if you send it around the holidays, it takes a little bit longer, and if you're sending it in the off period like now, it's often been a little bit quicker. Okay, so we got the Alden line, you got the Fuller line. Who else? Well, one of the things I have worked on is this issue with Stephen Hopkins and his wife married. Their older daughter, Constance Hopkins, married Nicholas Snow. And because William Bradford wrote in 1651 of Plymouth Plantation, he summarized the Mayflower families. And sometimes he wasn't specific. That wasn't his purpose. So when he talked about Constance Hopkins and her husband, Nicholas Snow, he said they have 12 children. They're all alive. But he didn't name any of those kids. When Nicholas Snow died in 1676, his will only names his sons, and we can identify 9 children, which essentially leaves 3 kids that were alive in 1651. And if they were sons, they were dead by 1676. But if they were daughters, they could also be dead, or they could be married daughters living in Plymouth, or some combination, 2 and 1 or 1 and 2.
Wow.
There's this theory written in the late 1800s that one of these missing 3 kids could have been the wife of Daniel Doane, and they have plenty of matrilineal descendants. So this is definitely a target for mtDNA studies. So there have been many descendants of Constance Hopkins Snow who have taken DNA tests and have matched. And I've identified a few descendants of Mrs. Daniel Doane to take it. I've gotten some results back, but they're a little bit preliminary at this point. Again, what I was mentioning to earlier, where I want to get descendants of 2 unique lines and have them match each other. That way I can be very confident that I have the correct line. Because you never know when you're tracing a matrilineal descent, especially as you point out, the names change every generation, that you have it truly correct. In case, say, in the early 1800s, a man has 2 different wives with the same first name, or there's an adoption in the 20th century that's not noted on the records. There's all these reasons you have to sort of consider when you're tracing a line 12 generations down to the present.
Wow. For people listening who think they're really good at this stuff, and then they listen to you, and it's like, okay, we got a lot more to learn and a lot more to work on. And what fun, though. And it's fascinating how the history is being rewritten, because basically in the last 10 years, we've developed a brand new powerful source, and we are that source.
Yes, the things I'm talking about are not applicable in every situation in Mayflower era or colonial genealogy, but the ones that they are, it's really, really fascinating. And it's amazing that people alive today can have a very important clue on some parentage back 400 years.
It's crazy. He's Chris Child. He's a senior genealogist of Newbury Street Press and the editor of the Mayflower Descendant. And he's telling us about how DNA is kind of changing the history of some of the descendant lines from passengers on the Mayflower. Thank you so much, Chris. Fascinating. Great stuff.
Thank you.
And coming up next, I'll talk to a Utah woman who learned through her grandmother information provided by her great-grandfather as he neared his death, and what that eventually resulted in. It's an ordinary person with an extraordinary find, on the way in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes.
Looking for an easy way to show off your family history and share it with your family? Family Chartmasters offers beautiful custom pedigree art pieces and inexpensive family reunion draft charts in any design or size that fits your needs. With a free consultation at FamilyChartmasters.com, you can get started creating a new family masterpiece. Family Chartmasters has over 11 years of experience in creating and printing family charts. They can print any style genealogy chart from any genealogy file and can create exactly what you're looking for. You'll work with a specialized and talented consultant whose goal is to make you happy. Decorative charts make fantastic gifts for all occasions. And with Family Chartmasters' option of ordering duplicate charts at half price along with your original purchase at full price, you can afford to give a family heirloom to each member of your family. Contact Family Chartmasters today at FamilyChartmasters.com for your free consultation. Family Chartmasters will give the greatest care to your family history. Scientific studies have proven that youth who know even a little bit about their family history perform better academically and have a greater sense of personal confidence and stability. Genealogy is its own incredible superpower that arms our children with super strength. But how do you get your child or grandchild interested in studying their family history? That kind of stuff is just for grandmas, right? Not anymore. ZapTheGrandmaGap.com leaps the generation gap in a single bound. Author Janet Havorka provides you with useful and timely advice on helping the young people in your life become engaged in their own family history. Janet has an entire collection of books to inspire the young and the young at heart in fun, interactive ways. She also offers creative tips and advice on her blog and in her free weekly newsletter. Stop by ZapTheGrandmaGap.com today to sign up for Janet's free email newsletter with 52 weeks of easy tips, free downloads, and order your set of resource books and workbooks.
Welcome back, Genies. It is our 300th episode of Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. It is so great to have you here, and I'm always excited to meet ordinary people with extraordinary finds, and Heather Ruth Pack reached out to me recently to share her story, and I thought you'd want to hear this too, because this is pretty unique. Heather, welcome to Extreme Genes.
Thank you.
Now, tell me about this. You had this story hanging out there like most of your life, correct?
Yeah, it's been such a huge part of my life, and it's becoming how most people know me and will talk to me. Oh, you're the girl that found out she was French. Yep, that's me. And
found out she was French. Well, talk about the mystery of this, because this went on for a long time. What was it, like age 12 where you first heard about this?
Yeah, so when I was 12, I was given an assignment to fill out my family tree going back just 4 generations. And I was sitting at my kitchen table. My mom was distracted making dinner, whatever, and it just seemed like a no big deal type assignment. And I said, okay, so I think I know my grandparents' names, and I'm making sure I got the spelling right. Okay, so give me the great-grandparents' names. So she's listing those off to me. And then I said, okay, and then I need their parents. Well, when I get to my father's father's father, she's like, well, we think his name's Nathan, and we don't know how to spell his wife's name, but we think it's this. I said to her, like, what? It just seemed baffling to me that my dad would not know his grandparents' parents. And it created just this drive in me that never went away. I'm going to find out who these people are. And I got pretty serious about it when I was 19. I was going to Brigham Young University, took a genealogy class. I got a D- in the class because I couldn't fill out my pedigree chart. And I went, okay, wait a minute. I need to get rewarded for input, not output. So I found a different genealogy class that taught research skills. This is pre-internet. I'm in the back room on the left-handed microfilm reader in the dark, just spinning census record after census record. And just kept hitting one dead end after another. Every time there was a new website, new tool, Control F became my best friend. Learning
this became your obsession, didn't it, girlfriend?
Oh, yeah. I had 5 kids in 6 years growing up, and I'm up at 4 in the morning, not for diapers or bottles, but on the computer trying to find dead people.
Well, and for people who are new to genealogy or thinking about getting into it, and they hear people like, see, this can become very addicting. It can really alter your life. There's no question about it. So you mentioned in your note to me that over time you learned that your great-grandfather had revealed some clues before he died. How long ago did he pass away?
He passed away in 1941, and I was born in 1969. So I knew people who knew him but never got to meet him myself.
Sure. And so how did you learn about these clues that he left?
Fortunately, his daughter-in-law, my grandmother, who's Italian, I call her Nona, she was a storyteller. And I used to spend hours with her, and she just told me story after story after ancestors about people that I didn't know, people I did know. And she told me this bizarre story one day about how my great-grandfather had a heart attack in the car while she was grocery shopping. And she had this impression as they were bagging up the groceries that she shouldn't go out to the car. So she asked the bagger to go out to the car for her. And when she goes out to the car, he's there holding my aunt, 8 months old, and he's dead. And she had to fill out the death certificate. He was visiting from Utah out in San Diego, and she had to fill out this death certificate. And she's telling me what it was like, and I'm just sitting there with my jaw dropped going, what?
Wow.
And she says, yeah, and fortunately, right before he died, he told me 4 things about himself, and I was able to use those to fill out the death certificate. And I said, what were they? And right before he died, he revealed his mother's name, which no one had ever known before. He revealed his birth date, and he revealed what town he was born in. And then he said something that ended up being a critical clue, and that was my mother was French. So
wait a minute. We've got a changed identity here, right?
Yeah, because his last name was Buchanan. We identified as Scots. We have Buchanan tartans all throughout our house. My father had a suit made out of Buchanan tartan. we always identified as Scottish, but as I got closer to census records and closer to the truth, I finally said to my father one day, I said, Dad, I don't want to freak you out, but I think we might be French and not Scottish. And that sparked a memory in him. And he says, oh, my gosh, when I was 10 years old, my father sat me down on the couch and said, son, you need to remember that we are French and not Scottish. And I thought, oh, that information would have been helpful about 15 years ago.
Yeah. So wait a minute. I want to understand what was the secret here? Why? That's a strange thing when you're dying to go, here's my real birth date and here's my mother's maiden. Right. Because is he really thinking through the death certificate himself, or what was the deal?
I have a couple theories. I would love more than anything to interview this guy, but I have one of my theories is I think he was 70 years old. I think he knew my life is short. He's got this grandbaby that he's meeting for the first time. I think there was something in him that just said, I don't want this story to die with me.
Okay.
And so that's all I can figure. But he had a very interesting story that had the truth been revealed, he would have gone to prison.
Oh.
So it makes sense to me that he didn't share it with everyone.
So he's avoiding all that. So now what happened? How did you then connect him with his birth mother? He gave you a name. And what about the birth father's side?
Yeah, so we assumed, obviously, that his father's name was Nathan Buchanan because he's John Buchanan. And the only Nathan Buchanan I could find in the United States that even remotely matched died at the age of 3. And
that's not a match.
So it's not a match. So I finally, this is what I've learned in all my research. You don't want to assume they're lying, but you also don't want to make assumptions based on what they do tell you. Mm-hmm. In other words, he said, my dad's name is Nathaniel, but he never explicitly said Nathaniel Buchanan. So we were making assumptions that obviously weren't true.
Right.
So finally, one day, I finally decided to just sit down on FamilySearch.org where they have the records. And I said, I'm going to stop making assumptions, and I'm only going to type in what he himself told my grandmother.
That's right.
And I looked up Susan, who was born in France, living in Illinois in 1870, because he was born in 1869.
Okay.
And up popped a Nathan and a Susan with a completely different last name, with a little boy named John, born in October of 1869. And I burst into tears because I knew I had found my family, but I had no way to prove that it was my family. And that's when I started doing what's known as reverse genealogy.
Mm-hmm. Pulling everything forward, all the other descendants, and see if you can find matches or stories in there. And what did you discover?
I found a third cousin living in Virginia. I wrote him. I said, this is my story. Does any of this sound familiar? He wrote me back, and he says, yes, we have a relative who disappeared. We thought he had died, and the dates matched. And I wrote him back, and I said, he didn't die. He lived, and he had children, and I'm one of them.
Wow. She is Heather Ruth Pack. She's a Utah resident with an amazing story of discovery. It's like a movie, isn't it, Heather? It's like that deathbed confession, and then it's passed along orally through one person in your family. You interviewed the right person, and look what it's turned into. Fantastic sleuthing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And coming up in 3 minutes, it's the star of The Genetic Detective on ABC Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock on the coast, 9 o'clock in between. It's CeCe Moore talking about her latest episode on extreme genes. Stay close. Well, genies, what a time we're all going through right now. And with all this time on our hands, you probably agree the best lemonade we can make out of this is to sharpen our genie axes and learn how to extend our family trees, gather more photos and documents, and discover those remarkable family stories our descendants can benefit from for generations. Well, I have more time now, too, and I want to help you learn what you need to know. That's why I've created a new Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. I'm so pleased that so many of you have already signed up and are helping us to create a supportive community of family history researchers. On this page, we can brainstorm and share ideas on how to tear down those brick walls that we all have, So feel free to join us. The Facebook page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Feel at home with others who live in our genie world and want to make the most of this unique time. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Join us.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Hey, Genies, it is Fisher, and everyone loves stories. From tales of daring do's to family legends about great Auntie Gemma's secret recipe for scones, stories connect us to our past, make sense of the present, and create the future. This year, RootsTech, the world's largest genealogy conference, celebrated the story of you. The event kicked off by celebrating 10 years of RootsTech with a look back at the stories the genealogy community has created together over the years. Attendees enriched their stories with classes about DNA and records and new technology. Keynotes this year included the inspiration behind the film The Blind Side, Leanne Toohey, Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer David Kennerly, and the NFL's all-time leading rusher Emmitt Smith. If you missed any part of these stories, you can purchase a virtual pass to gain access to 29 additional classes. The full virtual pass is available for only $129. You can watch the free session and purchase a virtual pass right now at rootstech.org. All right, back once again with CeCe Moore. She is the genetic detective on the ABC series. And CeCe, coming up this Tuesday, 10 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Central and Mountain. What are we going to be talking about?
Well, first of all, I hope everyone has been enjoying the series and the educational aspects of it, particularly for your audience. I hope that has been helpful, and maybe they've even picked up some tips. This next episode is called The Ramsey Street Rapist. From 2006 to 2008, there was a series of unsolved rapes in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So this was a serial rapist. And this was the first case that I worked where there were living victims, where my work could impact those who had actually suffered from these violent crimes.
And when there are living victims like that, it gets a little more complex emotionally, I bet, when you're researching something like this, right, C?
Yes. Initially I was pretty focused on the work, the investigative genetic genealogy. But then one of his victims reached out to me. So that was a big deal. In this case, I have to be a little bit more careful what I say because it still hasn't been adjudicated and he's going to have his day in court. And so this case was a bit unique in that when I was describing the genetic genealogy, I had to do it in a theoretical way versus the actual work. I do explain in the episode that there was a marriage that was an intersection. And so I was focused on this one marriage and their descendants, but it turned out that a brother of one of them married a sister of the other one.
Oh, boy.
And so, yeah, I spent all this time on reverse genealogy from this one couple, and I just couldn't find the guy. Could not find anyone who fit. So I was kind of at a dead end.
Sounds like you wound up down some rabbit holes.
I definitely did, and it was very frustrating. And I'd already turned in the report to the detective, and we had worked really closely at ruling everybody out that was a descendant of that couple, that original common ancestral couple. And in this case, another thing, on a side note, is that this detective actually had genealogy experience, and he had helped his wife solve her adoption case. So it was super awesome to work with the detective. Right, who was also a genealogist. So we were working together to rule out the first list of potential persons of interest, and then there just wasn't anyone. So I went back up that tree and found, oh, look at this. We've got another couple that would represent the same mix of DNA that I needed.
Wow. Did this cause any of the matches to appear closer than they really were?
Yes. So it really did complicate the relationships. And so people appeared to have a different relationship than they actually did. And it was because they were double cousins.
Right.
And it happened a couple of times just in the cases that you'll see on the series, where that wasn't the only time I had a double cousinship complicate the analysis. So, it was pretty common back in middle America with the big farm families.
Sure.
And
small towns.
A lot of people, found their spouse living very close by. So, of course, it makes sense. When the victim reached out to me in this case, it was after I finished doing the genetic genealogy work, but I was still very invested in the case. So it was a really big deal for me to hear from her. And I get to meet her in person in the episode.
Oh, wow.
That is heavy. And so hearing what my work meant to her, and she talks about it in the episode some, so I won't go into it, but it was just really meaningful and really eye-opening what victims go through. And they do carry around an incredible burden.
Incredible. She's CeCe Moore. She's the genetic detective in the ABC series on Tuesday nights, 10 o'clock Eastern and Pacific, 9 o'clock Central and Mountain Time. CeCe, we'll talk to you again next week about the next episode.
All right. I hope you all enjoy it.
And coming up next, David Allen Lambert for another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Looking for an easy way to show off your family history and share it with your family? Family Chartmasters offers beautiful custom pedigree art pieces and inexpensive family reunion draft charts in any design or size that fits your needs. With a free consultation at FamilyChartmasters.com, you can get started creating a new family masterpiece. Family Chartmasters has over 11 years of experience in creating and printing family charts. They can print any style genealogy chart from any genealogy file and can create exactly what you're looking for. You'll work with a specialized and talented consultant whose goal is to make you happy. Decorative charts make fantastic gifts for all occasions. And with Family Chartmasters' option of ordering duplicate charts at half price along with your original purchase at full price, you can afford to give a family heirloom to each member of your family. Contact Family Chartmasters today at FamilyChartmasters.com for your free consultation. Family Chartmasters will give the greatest care to your family history.
When was the last time you heard your grandmother's voice or saw your family enjoying life back in the 1950s or 60s? If the reason is you haven't known what to do with your old recordings, videos, and films, here's your answer. The Multimedia Center in Salt Lake City.
We brought in a video project to the Multimedia Center, and overnight they duplicated it to DVD so we could meet our deadline.
The Multimedia Center, 2870 East, 3300 South, Salt Lake City. Open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. Call 801-483-1717 or go to transferduplication.com.
Genies, it's Fisher with exciting news. The Weekly Genie, the official newsletter of Extreme Genes, is here. It's your Monday morning briefing on what's happening in the world of genealogy and family history and on Extreme Genes. Get all the details of jaw-dropping stories of discovery and keep up with the latest techniques in family history research. Get to know more about your favorite Extreme Genes personalities. And it's free. Sign up for the Weekly Genie now at extremegenes.com or the Extreme Genes Facebook page. And when you do, you'll receive David Allen Lambert's top 10 tips for beginning genealogists from the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society. Sign up today for the Weekly Genie. All right, back at it for our final segment this week of Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. It is our 300th episode today, and we're doing Ask Us Anything. David Allen Lambert is with me, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. David, what is our next listener question?
Well, this comes from Bonnie Wade Messia, who sent us a question about her Massachusetts ancestor who was in the French and Indian War, up in the battles up in Louisburg and Cape Breton, and he ended up going to Granville, Nova Scotia, where he actually got a land grant. And she has that record. Her question is, where are the military records? Well, my first place to say would be the Massachusetts State Archives, where we have in the Mass Archives collection countless muster rolls from all the parts of the 18th century and even back into the 17th century. So she said they couldn't find it, and obviously he's a military captain, so there should be some indication of him leading his own little company, but nothing there. My other thought is that he was attached perhaps with the British military, and if that's the case, it would be over at Kew in the British Archives in London. The British Archives would have regular British Army records. He could have enlisted with the regular British Army in Boston, perhaps, and been part of the expedition that went up there. But usually the colonial militia records are in the state now where they originated. So in Massachusetts, it hasn't had a lot of fires and stuff. It's possible that his muster roll did not survive. It was never returned for whatever reason. The other thing that might be possible is that when he went up there after the war, he could have gone up as what we call a planter. Versus in the Revolution, if you went to Canada, you're a loyalist. If you went over in the 1750s and 60s, after the expulsion of the Acadians, you were given basically free land. Farm, animals, buildings. They basically removed the Acadians and transplanted New Englanders. And so he could be part of that group. Granville, Nova Scotia, where her ancestors settled, does have township books, and that might give a further clue. But the military records, if they're not at the Massachusetts State Archives, which she checked, I would then turn my focus on London, England, to the British Archives out there at Kew.
Wow. That's a lot of great information, David. And, you know, the thing I'm always impressed about is how much colonial military information has still survived. There's a lot of it out there for colonial wars.
There really is, and the only place that had a fortunate accident was New York State. The New York State Library had a fire in the early part of the 20th century. The Dutch records that were at the very bottom smoldered and they're damaged, but the colonial records, including all of the French and Indian War and Revolutionary War records from most of New York that were kept there, are gone.
Yeah.
We only have a transcription, so we know someone was on a list because they typed it up a number of years before, but not all the details and the records were preserved. There are fragments, but very few.
Yeah, that was from 1911 up in Albany, and that was just a total disaster. I've seen pictures of it, and you just look at that photo of that building burning and realizing how much impact that still has on researchers today, and you realize, oh my gosh, what a travesty.
There really is such a gap in upstate New York records, as well as, things that were in New York City in the municipal area there. The building still stands. It's a gorgeous old building, well worth a look, but apparently a stray cigar with a gentleman hanging out in one of the reading rooms set the whole thing ablaze.
Oh, unbelievable. David, thank you so much. And that's Ask Us Anything for this week. And just a reminder, if you have a question for us anytime, you can email us at askusanything@extremegenes.com. Well, that's it. Our 300th episode is concluded. Thanks for joining us. We sure appreciate it. Don't forget to sign up for our weekly Genie newsletter. You can do it through our Facebook page or online at extremegenes.com. It's free. I give you a blog each week, plus links to past and present shows and to stories that you as a genealogist will find pretty darn interesting. Talk to you again next week. Thanks for joining us. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.